Well, good morning again. Thank you guys for joining in the worship this morning and lifting your voices with us here in praise. This fly might be part of my illustrations here in a minute. Maybe not. We'll see. So real quick, for those of you who kind of came in a minute ago, we have papers back here in the back for you, along with pens and so forth. If you want to get those for notes, you only have one side because I played golf Friday, and so I didn't get everything finished this week that I needed to get done for those. So you only have one side, which will have the notes. But then tonight we'll have those questions, the discussion questions. Everything will be online. Right now, your notes are actually online. So if you prefer to use a tablet or your phone or whatever, you can just go to our website, go to the download page, and you'll see the handout there. And you can just sort of fill in the blanks as we go along. So we are doing Facebook Live again today. Hopefully that's working since it's turned around. I don't know what's happening, so it may just be like this part of it. Who knows? But welcome to anybody who's watching us on Facebook Live. That's great. I apologize. Last week I didn't put the video onto YouTube Sunday afternoon. I just didn't think about it. I thought we had it covered, and I just didn't process it. But today I will get the video, as long as we're recording, we'll get the video online, and nice. And so that'll be available for you also on our download page as well as through our YouTube page. So kind of keep an eye out for those good things. Anybody who is sort of new to us, you can jump on IlCC.com. You can find out more about the church, about our mission, things that are going on. And we kind of update stuff on there. So, all right, enough with all of that fun stuff. Let's just go ahead. We're in the middle of this series, The Problem with God. The Problem with God. And we've sort of addressed some different problems that people have, right? People, maybe they do believe that there is a God out there, but they're not sure that He wants a relationship with them. Maybe that's you today. Maybe you're thinking God is probably real, but I just don't know that He knows me, and I don't know that it's possible to know Him. Maybe you think God is real, and maybe you have some faith in Him, and you've prayed, and He hasn't answered your prayers, and so that's made you doubt, whether or not He is caring and loving. And there are other people, who just flat out are atheists. They don't believe that God exists. They think that those of us who do believe God exists are silly, and they think that science has completely proven that God is not real. And so part of what we're walking through here with the problem with God is that God does actually exist. The problem with God is not that He's not out there. He's out there. The problem with God is not that He hasn't revealed Himself. He's revealed Himself. The problem with God is not that science has shown that He doesn't exist. The problem with God is actually He has revealed Himself more than adequately through science. And so we've been looking over the last several weeks at this whole concept of how science and how the creation that's around us actually points to the existence of a living God. And so we have kind of worked through all of this stuff, and we're saying, hey, we want to be able to make an argument, right? Not getting into a fight, but to make a case for the existence of God. And so we've sort of termed this as apologetics. That's the term for making a reasoned argument to justify something, and it's so we're doing that. We're going through this as an apologetics type series, and so we're kind of systematically walking through some things, looking at science, looking at different things. Not using the Bible, because why? Because some people, they don't believe that God exists. Then why would they ever believe that a book written about Him and written by Him would exist? That it would be truthful. So we're looking at things that people who may not believe that God is out there, that maybe they would believe. Maybe we can show them some evidence. We can point them to truth through this. And so in this series, we're walking through the classical apologetic method, and we're looking at this. We're saying, hey, God exists, and if God exists, then miracles are possible. If miracles are possible, then the Gospels are reliable accounts of actual events. Jesus rose from the dead, and what Jesus said can be trusted. And so we're kind of walking through this whole thing, and we're going to, by the end of this series, and hopefully over the next several months, we're going to break all of this stuff down, and we're going to see how all of this stuff is applicable, how all of it is truthful, how all of it can be kind of put in our back pocket and used day in and day out as we're engaging with people in our lives. And so through this whole apologetic process, we're learning some things about our ABCs. We're answering doubts, because all of us have them from time to time, right? We doubt, again, God didn't answer the prayer I thought, the way that I thought He would, and so I have doubts that He's listening to me. It builds confidence. You know, if we're going to talk to somebody who doesn't believe that the Bible is truthful, how do we engage them? Well, I'm not sure, because I don't really, I got a C in science, So how do we have confidence to be able to talk about this science stuff, right? So this builds our confidence so that we can engage people who aren't going to necessarily latch on to the Bible as truthful. And then it changes lives, right? We're going to see that apologetics will change your life. It'll change your life. It changes the things that you believe, the things that you think. It reinforces the things that you believe, so that we can get to the truth of Jesus, because He's the one who changes lives. And He'll change your life, and then as you're sharing this information, as you're engaging with people and you're talking about Him, He will engage them directly, and it'll change their lives as well. And of course, we're doing all this because we see the directive in 1 Peter 3:15 to be ready to make a reasoned argument for the hope that we have in Jesus. We found out a few things about truth, that it exists, that it's absolute and knowable, it's discovered, not invented, and it's transcultural. And so that means basically, if it's true, then it's true for you, it's true for me, it's true for people in China and Australia and everywhere else around the world. It's not bound by time. Truth is timeless. So if something is true today, then it will be true for here and forever, right? If something was true 10,000 years ago, it's true then, and it's true now. So we've seen that truth is absolute, and it's knowable, it's discovered, it's not invented. And we've been working through some of these scientific things. And the first thing that we sort of plowed through was the cosmological argument. And that basically states that everything has a beginning. Everything that has a beginning has a beginner. The universe has a beginning. This was the argument against the eternal universe. So if atheists say, hey, the universe is eternal and it has no beginning, then that's a mark against God, right? Because if the universe is eternal, then it wasn't created. And if it wasn't created, then that kind of chalks up against us for God here. But we saw that the universe actually was created, that it had a beginning, and therefore it has a beginner. And of course, we worked through, last week we kind of started digging into this teleological argument. And this was the argument that says that every complex design has a designer. And this is the case for intelligent design, meaning that things are finely tuned. And when we logically state this, it runs through like this. Every design has a designer. The universe is a complex design. Therefore, the universe has an intelligent designer. And of course, like I said, it ran us into this idea of finely tuned, right? We saw how the anthropic principle, that all these different things are sort of put together to support life. And we saw that, the universe kind of exploded out into existence, and it was put together in a way that would support life. It would support us actually being here, that it would support the grass and the trees and the fish and everything that we see, right? It is finely tuned to support life. And so through this whole process, this now brings us to the question of, where did life come from? Where did life come from? How did life start? And what caused the first living organism? And this is the big how did we get there question, right? The how did we get here question. So we're going to kind of talk through and see what science has to say. And let's remember that science, right? Science looks for what caused what to happen, right? Science is the search for causes. So scientists are looking for reasons. They're looking for causes. What caused us, what caused life to actually begin? And people have been asking this question for a long time, and of course they've been looking to science to sort of to reveal the answer to what caused life to Earth, what caused life to start on Earth. And so that's what we're going to kind of dig in today. We saw that the teleological argument we saw the fine-tuning for the universe to support life, and today we're going to look at the teleological argument to talk about the fine-tuning of life, right? And so, last week we saw that God created the universe. He created the planet. He created, he got the land masses together. He got the oceans together, and then he stopped, right? He kicked back his heels, and he's like, that's awesome. No, we just stopped there because we didn't want to get into life yet. But God created everything else to support life first. And now, this week, we're going to see that He did all of that stuff to get us here. He put all of these other things in place to put life on this planet. So logically stated, the teleological argument what we're going to look at here today to support intelligent design for life is every design has an intelligent designer. All living things are complex designs, therefore living things have an intelligent designer. All living things are complex. And so as we kind of dig in today, we're going to see some of those complexities. And again, it's going to get kind of nerdy in here, and I apologize for those of you who dislike nerdiness. It hurts my brain, obviously, processing this stuff. It's something I've been working on for several months, trying to wrap my own head around all of it to kind of guide us through this. But we're going to look at science and see how it moves us into this life is designed idea. All right, so as we start looking at the existence of things and how they got here, what caused things, there's really only two options, right? There are natural causes, which is unintelligent. Natural causes are unintelligent causes, or intelligent causes. And so, we were kind of talking last week, and I brought up the idea of if you're hiking in the woods and you find a Rolex watch, what do you think? That naturally occurred? Or do you think that somebody designed that watch and they just happened to drop it in the woods? Right? It's intelligently designed. So when we're thinking about these things, we want to look at a couple of ideas. Are the things that we see in life, are our lives sort of naturally occurring? Were they caused by the wind and the rain and all this fun stuff? Or do we think that there's intelligent design behind it? And so I want to bring us a couple of examples here to consider as we think through this. So this is the Grand Canyon, and the picture actually looks better on my screen than it does on here, but you can tell this is the water below, this is the Grand Canyon. And so when you look at this, do you think that a farmer let his ox get away with a plow and all of a sudden here's the canyon? No. Do you think that some miners kind of went digging and they dug this whole thing out? No. You can look and you say, okay, well, wait a minute. It's possible, it's plausible that this thing occurred by natural causes, right? And we can recreate something like this. We can put a mound of dirt and then throw a bunch of water on it and see how it all settles, and it cuts its path through the dirt, right? So that's what we believe has happened here. Rain, flood, river running, found its way through, and it's cut its way through. When I was a kid, I don't know about you guys, but when I was a kid, I used to play with a garden hose, like all the time, because we lived in the country and didn't have anything else to do. And so it was either climbing trees, which I hated doing because I usually fell out, or play with the water. So I was playing with the water hose, and I would usually stand there, and I would point the nozzle at the ground. And you know how sprayers, you can have it where it's like kind of misting, or you can have it like where it's throwing arrows at it's like the full stream. I would pretend that I was a fireman and I would just spray a single spot on the ground. So what happened? Man, it would bubble up and all this stuff, and before you know it, I had me a hole going. And if my parents didn't come out and tell me to stop, I kept doing it. And eventually, there were a few times I eventually got a tunnel. Right? The water dug down underneath the grass, moved all the dirt out of the way, and then it started coming up on the other side. It was awesome, right? Water can do that. Water can make a canyon like this. And so it's sort of the same principle. Now, we can imagine God holding the garden hose down here and doing this to the Grand Canyon, right? But this is an example of natural causes. Naturally, something like this happens. So what about this? Now, would you look at this and go, hey, I bet that thousands and thousands of years ago, before these guys even existed, wind and rain came in and carved these faces in the side of a rock mountain? Not possible. Natural causes didn't do this, right? Doesn't matter how long we have a rock formation on the side of a mountain, wind and rain and natural elements are not going to create this. They'll tear it apart, because what? Natural causes tear things apart. They don't create things, right? We also have, if you get on the Google and you ask the Google about Mount Rushmore, you can find documentaries, you can find videos, you can find all kinds of stuff about the making of Mount Rushmore, about the carving. You can see the artist who did all of this. You can see his preliminary designs and his sculptures that he did that are, scale models, basically, as he prepped to get up on the mountain and do this. So you look at this and you think, this didn't happen by natural causes. This had to be intelligently designed, right? And we know that this is intelligently designed because, like I said, you can get on the Google and you can find evidence. You can find when it was done. You can see pictures of it being done. So what about this? When you look at that, do you think that that is a result of natural causes or intelligent design? It's intelligent design, right? I mean, the pyramids, we scratch our heads going, how did they do that? We have cranes and forklifts and all kind of heavy earth-moving equipment. These guys didn't have that. Do we have videos of them making it? We have pictures of them making it? Do we have the blueprints that they used? So how do we know that this is an intelligent design and not something that appeared because of natural causes? Because we can observe it, right? We're looking at it, we're observing it. We have other information available to us. Again, science is looking for what caused things, and scientists can say, well, people caused this. So this brings us to our first principle for today, or our big principle for today, and it's the principle of uniformity. The principle of uniformity. And basically this just says that what caused or causes something in the present caused things in the past. So we can look at Mount Rushmore, we can see faces that have been carved into rocks, and we can say that's an intelligent design. What caused that was an intelligent person who created a schematic. They came up with a game plan, and they got the tools and the resources together, and they went up there and made that. Same thing is true about our pyramids and all this stuff that we see. We look at it and we say, okay, well, if an intelligent person had to design and create these faces on the side of a mountain, then it's plausible, it's very likely that when we see these pyramids out in the middle of nothing, that those were designed by intelligent people and built and put together, right? So that's what the principle of uniformity kind of tells us, is if we've observed something in our present and it's created an end result, the cause has led to a certain effect, then we can look at other effects that have happened in history and say, okay, it's probably a similar cause that brought it to be. All right? And so if we look at Mount Rushmore, we look at the pyramids, and we can say, hey, you know what? These were intelligently designed. Then when we start looking at life, and we start looking at the complexity of life, shouldn't we think, well, it's pretty complex. It's more complex than some rock faces on the side of a mountain. It's more complex than a pyramid out in the middle of the desert. Wouldn't it lead us to believe that life probably has an intelligent designer? You would think, but atheists and skeptical scientists have thought, well, maybe not. And so they've been looking for the origin of the first life. And so we can in this next few minutes, we can sort of rely on this principle as we kind of walk through and we look at some things. This will be sort of the underlying element that's going to be in our next few minutes of conversation here. This principle of uniformity. So how did life on planet Earth start? From an atheistic view, life started by random chance. It started when a couple of unintelligent, non-living molecules came together, right? According to Darwinism, according to atheist belief, the way that life happened is that unintelligent things came together to form life. Now, my question to you is, if you're unintelligent, can you pass along intelligence? Just something to think about. So here's what we have. This little guy is an amoeba, and I've named him Arnold. And, atheists believe and Darwinists believe that every life came from this guy, right? Everything started out from this little simple organism. And this guy, he's been magnified a few hundred times, and that's what allows us to see him. Just to sort of give you an idea of the size of this little dude, if you were to take, on your piece of paper there, if you were to draw a 1-inch line, just literally 1-inch line, you could line hundreds of him up on that 1-inch line. Hundreds of them, right? And you probably put them side by side on the width of a pencil mark, right? I mean, it's just crazy how small these things are. But every atheist and atheistic scientist and Darwinists believe that this is how life on Earth started. That it started as a single-celled little amoeba that grew into something else. Creationists, those of us who believe that this is not the truth, but we believe that God created everything, we sort of kind of talk about this as being the belief that you exist because you went from the goo to you via the zoo, right? Because you started out as this little microbial little amoeba, this microscopic blob, and then you kind of evolved. All of a sudden you grew some fins and you started swimming, and then you grew some legs and you started crawling around, and then all of a sudden you got a backbone and you started standing up straight, right? You looked like a monkey. Some of you, I mean, from the goo to you via the zoo, right? So you go from this just not even visible to the naked eye thing, you evolve into an animal, and we'll see, Darwinists actually think that that we share ancestry with trees, because all living things came from that one amoeba. All living things came from the first collision of non-living molecules that formed life. And so not only are you related to funny creatures in the zoo, you're also related to poison ivy and to trees and to flowers. And so, obviously some of us look more like roses than others, but whatever. Anyway, so there's one guy who has taken this from the goo to you via the zoo, and he says it like this. He says, from the infantile to the reptile to the crocodile to the gentile, which is really kind of funny because it walks through this whole evolutionary process, that it goes from just the nothingness, the infantile little blob, all the way up to a human being. And so, the process. And Kudler, I mentioned this to you the other day. We were going to look at pond scum. We were driving by a pond, and there was scum on top of it. And
we were looking for a ball.
We were looking for a golf ball. And so, so evolutionists believe that you go from that little Arnold into some pond scum, and eventually, like I said, you work until you develop some fins, and you swim over to the edge, and then you finally develop some arms and some legs, and you pull yourself up, and then you just continue evolving into what we know now. And so, again, I just don't think that unintelligent matter coming together to form intelligent matter is a plausible argument. And science is sort of proving us right in that theory, that it's not possible for unintelligent. You don't see two pieces of sand come together, and if you keep putting them together enough times, they're going to turn into something, right? They don't turn into a fruit fly. They don't turn into a turtle. They don't turn into a person, right? It doesn't happen. It's just not plausible. And so this brings us to kind of break down this conversation of evolution. And so Darwinists and evolutionists, they believe in microevolution. And this basically is the thought that adaptive changes in a species will occur that actually helps them survive. Now, as we talk about evolution, microevolution is actually possible. It's been viewed, it's been observed, and there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't speak to the starting of life, it doesn't speak to the creation of life, it just speaks to the survival of life. Right? So microevolution. And so Darwin, he had finches. He loved finches, he loved birds. He had these finches, and he observed that his finches, when it was wet weather, his finches, their beaks would grow bigger. Their beaks would grow smaller. And then when it was dry weather, they got bigger. And so he observed this, and it was like, okay, so why would there be a change? Why would there be a physical change in a bird with just their beaks based on the habitat, based on the condition of the weather? Well, wet seasons meant that they didn't have to dig as much for seeds, and the seeds were actually a little bit soggy, right? Anybody had any soggy toast? How hard do you have to bite on that, right? It doesn't crunch at all. You don't need much strength to eat soggy toast. You don't need, as a bird, as a finch, you don't need as much beak power, if you will, to eat seeds. And so in the wet season, the finches had smaller beaks. He also observed that in the dry seasons, that their beaks got bigger, and the reason for that is because the seeds were stuck in hard ground, and they would have to use their beaks to sort of dig them out. And then, of course, they're sun-baked, they're harder to get into, right? And so they needed these bigger beaks, they needed stronger beaks to actually be able to eat. It's how they survived, right? Here's the thing. Darwin never actually observed these finches go from finches to parrots. He never saw them go from finches to cats. He never saw them go from finches to any other species. They stayed finches. Modern day scientists are trying to show that microevolution leads into macro, and they're doing some tests on some different things. They do fruit flies. It's their most common thing to test because fruit flies have a really short lifespan. And so they can manipulate the DNA structures and all this other stuff of fruit flies. They can do things to them, and they can observe them over their whole lifespan and see what happens. And so they've been manipulating them, and they've had some fruit flies who've had, wings come out of their eyes and all kinds of crazy stuff. But they've never had fruit flies turn into anything other than fruit flies. Right? They've had other things happen. They've had extra legs, they've had extra wings, they've had wings in weird spaces. They stayed fruit flies. They survived in their conditions, but they never became anything else. There's another scientist who's been manipulating E. coli bacteria, and he's been doing this for 25, 30 years, and he's manipulating it, trying to get the E. coli to turn into something else. And he's manipulated it, he's tested it, he's done a whole bunch of things, hot weather, cold weather, different kinds of injections of different things into it, tried to combine it with other things, and at the end of the day, what does he have? He still has E. coli. He's seen variations, he's seen changes, he's seen microevolution happen in the E. coli, but it's never turned into anything else. It's not turned into a different kind of bacteria. It hasn't grown into any kind of living organism outside of the E. coli. So, just to help us maybe a little better understand this. Golden doodles. Golden doodles. Dog breeders. They have bred dogs. So golden doodles are what? They're golden retrievers mixed with poodles, right? And so dog breeders, they have for eons, right? For eons, dog breeders have bred different kinds of dogs together to come up with different types of dogs, right? So If somebody hadn't put a golden retriever and a poodle in the same room together, we wouldn't have golden doodles, right? But we do. And breeders have been working, they come up with like teacups, and they come up with, whatever. All these different types of dogs, these different breeds of dogs. But at the end of the day, an intelligent dog breeder can't put two dogs together and come up with a cat. Homoousios. You guys remember me saying homoousios? I've butchered it a bunch of times when we talked before. Substance of the same substance. You cannot produce something that you are not. You can't put two dogs together and come up with a cat or a bird or an elephant or a giraffe or whatever else you want to come up with. Now you can come up with different kinds of dogs, but it's still, at the end of the day, going to be a dog. Microevolution has allowed wolves and foxes. They've had different evolutionary changes in their fur, in their claws, the way they engage their environments. They've had these things so they could survive, but never once has one species turned into a different species. It's never been observed. It's never been recreated. It just doesn't happen. But the argument that's posed by atheists is that we go from microevolution into macroevolution. And macroevolution is adaptive changes will eventually lead to new species. And our big example is an ape will turn into a human. All right? A chimpanzee will become a human being through micro then macro evolution. The micro part, monkeys start walking differently, they engage their habitat differently, there's some changes that happen to them, but they never actually become humans. The macro part never happens. They will never evolve enough to become a completely different species than what they are. So, evolutionists, Darwinists believe that these small changes will eventually lead to these big changes, these things that we'll just kind of pick up here. So, microevolution, these small changes will never actually go into the macro. It'll never lead to, the finches didn't change, right? They didn't change from birds into cats. The dogs, they may change the way they look, their appearance, but they never become another animal. And so, as humans, we can safely say, because we see what happens in the present, we can say what happened in the past, right? We can say that chimpanzees, apes, we didn't come from them. We didn't evolve from those creatures. Here's a little visual aid to sort of help us out here. So, with the diagram over on the other side there, this is microevolution, right? Microevolution, there's small changes, but you never go from anything other than a dog. All the way through, it's all the same species. It's all the same. It's a dog, whether it's a wolf, whether it's a Great Dane, whether it's, whatever. Nothing, it doesn't change, right? It's micro, it's minor, there are little changes. But here's what evolutionists and Darwinists believe, right? It starts out as just a nothing, then it becomes pond scum, or an amoeba, and then it turns into pond scum, which becomes different versions of fish and reptiles and whatever else, and it just continues to evolve until you get to the top with primates and humans. It just doesn't happen. There are genetic limits. When breeders go to breed dogs, they hit genetic limits. There are certain dogs they just can't breed together because they hit genetic limits. There are certain things that it won't work. And so they hit genetic limits. And the same thing is true here with Darwinists and with evolutionists. They hit these genetic limits, they just refuse to accept them. They refuse. So, Richard Dawkins, he makes a comment, and I think I may have the quote in here, but he makes a comment about how he sticks to his naturalist and naturalism theory. He just automatically kicks creationism out the door. He doesn't believe that it's even possible, so he only looks at things this way. Even though all of the evidence Everything that science has discovered points in a different direction than this. He just doesn't accept it. Atheists just refuse to accept it. So this is the goo to you via the zoo. You see the reptiles, you see all of the different things that they believe that we have evolved. We've gone through all of these changes until we landed at human life. It's not possible. It's not possible. Now, this next slide, I just can't. So, once you get into a conversation with some atheists, with some scientists, and you show them that this whole evolutionary theory is shot, it's wrong, you ask them, okay, well then what's plausible? They don't want to say God, and we'll talk about why they don't want to say God. God brings other implications into the discussion, which we'll get into next week. So, some of them have said aliens. Aliens brought the first life to Earth. Who made the aliens? How did they get to be living creatures, right? We're still back at the point of origin of life. How did they become living? How did that happen? There had to be an intelligent designer in order for there to be an intelligent being, right? For there to be an intelligent result of something happening, there had to be an intelligent starter to the whole thing. So back to Arnold. I love little Arnold. He's so cute. So, with Arnold, this is the simplest form of life. It's a single cell amoeba, right? And this is the nucleus, and and we can like, you can get on the Google and look at magnified pictures of cells. I said that real southern. It's awesome. But you can see all of the different little things that are in it. I mean, it's like an entire city living in this thing. And every little component of it has its job. And it's just absolutely incredible. And so within this little guy, there's a whole bunch of DNA. There's a whole bunch of stuff that if we were to extract all of the data from it, it would fill up more than 1,000 volumes of encyclopedias. More than 1,000. Okay? Magnified a whole bunch of times. You extract the data from this guy, and you have, this is about, I don't know, I think I counted up about 195 pictures of books in this picture. All right? We need 1,000 of these books. 1,000 volumes to get to where we could house the data that comes out of the most simplest life form. Natural causes or intelligent design? So Arnold has DNA. And Bill Gates talked about DNA. He's a computer guy. He's not a scientist. Well, maybe he could be a computer scientist. But Bill Gates was talking, he compared DNA to being like programming. Like for computers, it's programming. It tells all of the cells, it tells all of the things inside where it lives, how to function, how to cooperate with each other, what it's going to look like, right? And you guys are kind of familiar with DNA, and we live in the modern age where forensic science solves crimes, and there's a bunch of shows that we all like to watch, and we see that, hey, if we're ever going to kill somebody, we're not going to leave DNA behind, right? Because we're just smarter than that. But anyway, don't kill people. But there's the existence of DNA. And this is what DNA looks like. And I'm not smart enough to explain it, so we're not going to dig too deeply into it. But there's crazy strands of information. And there's a gajillion different possibilities for them to line up together to create something. Now you think about your human body, right? How many cells are in the human body? Trillions. Trillions of cells. Right? Trillions of cells. Now, and they all have, DNA, RNA, blah, 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 all kind of A's that are in there that help us know if we're going to have hazel eyes or blue eyes or green eyes or brown eyes or straight hair, curly hair, no hair, some hair, hair in weird places. It happens. This stuff exists by the truckloads. Natural causes, unintelligent molecules coming together. This is in every living thing. Like there's DNA in every living thing because it is told how to live. Brings us to the question, which came first? Oh, it's blurry. Boo. Chicken or the egg? You can tell that's a chicken and that's an egg, right? Which came first, the chicken or the egg? I'm just going to go ahead and let the cat out of the bag because he'll chase the chicken. The chicken came first. And we'll talk about why we know that tonight during our discussion, so be around for a small group discussion. But anyway, so here's the thing. Chicken or the egg? Which came first? Chicken came first. How do we know that? We'll talk about tonight. But here's the thing with life, right? So it's impossible for unintelligent molecules to come together. And it's impossible for microevolution to lead to macroevolution and bring about life. And here's why. Proteins are needed to have DNA. DNA is needed to have RNA. RNA is needed to have a cell. The cell is needed to have proteins. Proteins need a cell. Cell needs RNA. Like these things all have to exist at the same time before life can exist. All of these things. So when it comes to evolution, if these two guys are together, they will never come and find these two guys. Because it's not possible. It's not possible. And the whole thing behind this is called irreducible complexity. Irreducible complexities. And this is the idea that a system will not work if any component is removed. So if you remove one part of the equation, the whole thing doesn't work. The whole function fails completely. And we might watch a video tonight that sort of outlines this, but think about a mousetrap, right? A mousetrap is, in and of itself, a pretty complex little design, right? It's got a bar, it's got a spring, it's got a thing, it's got a little piece of wood that's all held together. If you remove any one pieces of that, the mousetrap doesn't work. If you take the base plate away, what's the spring and what's the bar and all that other stuff? What's it gonna? The bait plate? What's all that stuff gonna stick to? If you take the bar away, then you can't load the spring, right? Irreducible complexities. If you take one part away, then the whole thing fails. So going back to this picture here, if any one of these things isn't found, then life doesn't exist. Evolution is not possible. So the way evolution works is it determines something that it needs or something that it doesn't need in order to survive. And it makes a minor change to acquire or get rid of that thing. So in order for life to evolve, it would mean that all of these things would be able to exist independently. And they can't do that and come together and make life. It just doesn't happen. The whole life structure, the whole life system is an irreducible complexity. You can't get life if you don't have the whole thing. So for the theory of unintelligent molecules coming together to even form the amoeba that we were just looking at, it just doesn't make sense. It's not possible. Science shows that it's not possible, and science doesn't say anything. Science just gives us the data. It's scientists who interpret the data who say what they think. Right? So for us to say science doesn't tell us that God does exist or doesn't, no, science doesn't tell us anything. Science just gives us data. And then we have to observe the data, and we have to process through it, and then we make claims based on it. Scientists make claims based on the data, and sometimes they just make the wrong claims because they don't want to recognize the truth. The truth's knowable. It's discovered. It's not invented. All of this stuff just sounds a lot like Genesis to me. Genesis 1, verse 20, then God said, let the water swarm with living creatures and let the birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the sky. So God created the large sea creatures and every living creature that moves and swarms in the water according to their kinds. Underline that if you're in your own Bible or you're using an app. Just highlight that, according to their own kinds. We're going to talk about that tonight. He also created every winged creature according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Jumping down to 24. Then God said, let the earth produce living creatures according to their kinds, livestock, creatures that crawl, and the wildlife of the earth according to their kinds. There it is again. And it was so. So God made the wildlife of the earth according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that crawl on the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. Jumping to 26. Then God said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness. Now, why is he saying our? Because he exists in Trinity, right? God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. Later discussion. Let us make man in our image according to our likeness. They will rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the livestock, the whole earth, and the creatures that crawl on the earth. So God created man in his own image. He created him in the image of God. He created them, male and female. God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. Now, it's not just in Genesis that we see some throwback to the whole creation of human life. We see this in Psalm 139, picking up at verse 13. For it was you who created my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. And I will praise you because you have been remarkably and wonderfully, because I have been remarkably and wondrously made. Your works are wondrous, and I know this very well. My bones were not hidden from you when I was made in secret. So it's not just Genesis, and it's not just in the Old Testament here with Psalms. We also see Jesus making reference to it here in Matthew 10, when Jesus said, even the hairs of your head have been counted. You have been created in a way. God knows every hair that's on your body. They've all been counted. They've all been identified. Every molecule in your body, every cell in your body. God finely tuned all of it to work together to create you, to create life. Our good friend Charles Darwin, he said this, if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. If it's possible, if it could be demonstrated, I think we saw that science has blown this thing to bits. Now, Brother Darwin didn't exist with all the modern technology and science stuff that we have today, so he was still looking for answers. But he even questioned his own theory. He questioned it. If it could be demonstrated, my whole thing would be broken down. Darwin had his doubts about evolution. He had his own doubts about it. Going back to Richard Dawkins, and we saw this last week, the appearance of design is overwhelming. The appearance of design is overwhelming. He's an atheist. He sticks to evolution, and he sticks to Darwinism because he believes naturalism. And he doesn't want to accept any other option. Things just naturally occur. That's how we have it. Even though it appears overwhelmingly to be designed. I mean, come on. Aliens probably brought the first amoeba, dropped it off, put some fertilizer on it, said good luck, pinned a 20 to its shirt. Anyway, science has not debunked the Bible. Science has actually revealed that intelligence in design exists, that there is intelligence in life. It doesn't go against what we believe as Christians. It doesn't go against what we see in the creation story. Science has only pointed us to the fact that there is intelligence behind it all. You exist. You didn't evolve from an amoeba or pond scum. You have been fine-tuned to live because a loving God, an intelligent designer, created you. He fine-tuned the space around you where you live so that you could live, and then He fine-tuned you to exist in that space. He created you. He loves you. He wants to be in a relationship with you. That's why Jesus came to the earth. That's why Jesus had His ministry. That's why He died on the cross. That's why He was buried and He rose after 3 days, was to make a way for us, for you, to be in relationship with Him. And if you're here today or if you're watching online and you're not in a relationship with Jesus today, I want to just ask you if you'll just simply pray and say to God, God, I'm a sinner and I need forgiveness. And I know that forgiveness is freely offered through Jesus, and I confess that Jesus is Lord. And I want Him to be the Lord of my life. And Jesus, I put my faith and trust in You. And I want You to save me. If you pray that, if you confess that, and Jesus will come into your life, He will save you. And you'll start a relationship with Him. And it changes everything for eternity. It changes everything for eternity. Friends, those of us who are already connected in relationship with Jesus, I want us to continue praying for courage to engage the culture around us, to work on learning these different principles, these different things from science that God is showing us that point to Him, so that we can engage our culture and reveal the truth of who God is, that God actually exists, to those around us. Pray that God will give us the opportunity to have those conversations, and He will give us the recall of information to share with people when it's time. Let's pray. Father God, today we want to just thank You for designing us. God, for designing the universe to create space where we can exist. And God, for so lovingly and so patiently and so caringly creating each and every single one of us. Lord, let us not forget that we are Your creation, that we are made in Your image. And Lord, our life and the lives of those around us are valuable because we are image bearers of You. God, I just pray that today we recognize that there is a Creator, that You are the Creator, that You love us and You want to be in a relationship with us. And Lord, I just pray that we step into that relationship with You, that we lean into it, that we seek You with everything in us. And Lord, I just pray that as we lean in, Lord, as we engage in a relationship, I pray that You just transform us. You transform our lives. Lord, You bring us these answers to our doubts. Lord, that You build our confidence in who You are. And Lord, that You change our lives and allow us to be part of changing the lives of other people. God, we love You. We thank You. It's through the name of Jesus that we pray. Amen.